Hi, I'm Paul Wheels, founder of IoT North. Great to have you online with us tonight. We've got Lukasz, who's going to be having a chat with me about IoT Consultants. Hi, Lukasz.
Yeah. Hello, Paul. I'm Lukasz Malinowski, the IoT advisor and trainer, and today we will talk about IoT Consultant from non-developer and developer perspective. I think that's going to be great chat.
I'm looking forward to this chat because it's something I can actually talk about rather than the very technical stuff that we quite often have, which John usually takes more of a lead on. John, how are you feeling? I believe you've had that delightful cold stroke.
Well, Paul, it was my birthday yesterday, and I spent most of the evening laid out on the living room floor because I literally couldn't move. I was so sick because there's cold. I'm feeling a bit better now, but not very chatty. So I'm glad to hand over to you.
Hey, everybody who's online, please do say hello. We've got online so far. We've got Guy. Guy's CTO at Invisible Solutions. Really glad to have you online. Please do fire questions and input on the show tonight. It's a bit of a conversation. Keen to get your insights and feedback, and we'll pop them up on screen like this one. And we've got John McDermott. Developing satellite comms telematic systems for monitoring boats, which funnily enough, just before we went live, we had John and Lukasz talking about sailing around. I believe John's now teaching. Is that right, John?
Yeah, I teach the junior sailing at the Sailing Club. And I've been on yachts at various times. I do a talk on the satellite communications as well. Interesting.
Do you?
I do, yeah. I think I've done it for IoT North.
That must have been quite some time ago.
It was a while ago. Yeah, it was a while ago. Yeah. Arduino size board aerial flings messages out to satellites as they're passing overhead for your knot spots out at sea, Scottish Highlands, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Very good. I was at Northeast Automotive Alliance event last week in Sunderland, and bumped into an old colleague of mine from BT who's working for a company doing private 5G, and they actually had 5G in a van with them at the event. It was quite interesting to see. Obviously, satellite connected, but pretty damn impressive speeds, which was pretty cool. So, Lukasz, the role of an IoT consultant.
Yeah. So let's dive into this topic because for me this is my passion, which turned out to be my paid job, which is pretty cool. And I need to make a disclaimer at the very beginning that I am a developer. I always have been. Literally, I cannot remember a time when I was not coding, even as a child. So that's why my brain is structured in kind of awkward way, and we will cover that today because it sometimes really hurts and impacts the communication with others that are, let's say, non-developers. So yeah, please take that into consideration, that whatever I'm doing and whatever I'm sharing that from the developer's perspective. Though I try to manage my developer's brain as good as possible. So let's start with the main question. So what is the role of an IoT consultant? And this is a pretty open question. And so that's why, based on my own history, I defined those steps in my journey, and that is pretty relevant for most of IoT consultants I met. So I started as a developer, basically writing firmware for devices to make them do things that they were not meant to be doing, just for fun, right? And after I got some skills, I decided that I can level my impact a bit, leverage the cloud backend. So I just started to architect systems. And once you develop systems and design architectures, you realize that there is something more to it. Like you can start see all of those little nuances, like security. So I became security auditor. And finally, I'm the advisor that kind of flips the whole pyramid upside down. But as you can see, just purely on this history, on my own example, what about the business, right? Like the whole journey was focused on technology, probably because, as I said at the very beginning, I am a developer, and developers tend to play with technology because it's simply fun. So the best business advisors I met were not developers, and that's why this is something that's extremely interesting for me, because I always thought that having developers background, it really helps you to manage complex issues, and it does. But then you manage the complex issues in the developers kind of mindset, which is yeah, not typical for business, and that's why it really doesn't work that well. So, what is the developer's mindset? So first of all, developers make unconscious assumptions about things. Then they use abstractions that are closely related to the programming languages, but not to the business logic and to the logic as such, right? And as a result, we as developers communicate differently and pay attention to different concerns that basically makes everyone that is not developer really confused, and yeah, this really lacks the common understanding. So I've got some extreme examples from my own history. Fortunately, that was pretty long time ago, though I wanted to share them with you to show the mismatch between the technology and the business side of things. So as a developers, sometimes we suggest our customers that we will write some script to automate some task, which makes total sense and probably even provides the business value, though it is framed in a way that no one really can understand what we are trying to do and why we are trying to do this thing, and why we want to get paid at the end of the day because of doing that. The same about the creating generic template, which is generic templates are great, uh, but if you don't really have that developer's mindset, you don't understand the whole concept of templating, or actually you do understand it totally differently that we use this term as developers. Then like to extreme, like if you start discussing the frameworks with your customers as an IoT consultant, typically that is not the best idea, because once again, it is as far from the business values as it can be. And my favorite example, when someone tried to convince the customer that the thing they were talking about is a function, it's not a function, it's a class from programming perspective, which is pure nonsense, right? But once again, all of those things happened for developers without they really thinking about it. And as a result, the customer is totally confused and is lost and do not see any value that we provide. So once again, what's the role of an IoT consultant now from the, let's say, experienced advisor perspective that tries to make his developer's brain behave? And this is how I look at it, that the IoT consultant should focus on educating on capabilities instead of functionalities. Should define the business use case, right? Not some kind of class diagram, and deliver business value. So, Paul, like you said that you are not the developer, but hopefully those tasks related to the IoT consultant are close to you. And so how do you think about them? Like, do you agree with
Yeah.
introduction, or you would add something?
Yeah, I mean, like the way that I work is I'm technically minded, but I'm not a developer. I haven't developed since 1999, 2000.
Okay.
Was probably the last time I coded, and it was like HTML and stuff. Um, but like so I've got like a bit of an understanding of how this world works, right? But
Mhm.
the way that I approach this is from problem statements and qualifying things and validating things. So I work very much with an ethos of like inspired by Eric Ries and Lean Startup of understand what the problem is and what the value is. Now, sometimes what can throw a bit of a curveball for people and for is that actually a business may be willing to make a loss to solve a problem, um, and use technology, but more so they'll be looking for a return of investment, or a direct return of investment. So it's really about that problem statement, and then starting to look at what could solve that problem and what makes the logical decision on that. You know, for example, there are opportunities out there where we all think, well, you should be replacing a problem with using technology, but actually, is the problem really that much of a problem that justifies that investment? You know, does it justify to have that device at the edge with a sensor and the complexity of it? And you know, there's actually been some experiences that I've had where actually a pen and paper has been more of a logical solution to something rather than a big investment in technology as well.
Yeah, totally. Let me make this topic clear for everyone, because I think that's a great point. That throwing modern technology at some problem doesn't typically is not the best way to solve it, right? And as you said, finding the root cause, which is typically more in the process type of area, the way that the whole thing is organized, including some manual labor, right? So there is the root cause, and then that's the area that we can actually provide some value. And whenever I see a discussion on LinkedIn, for instance, that someone suggests throwing the most modern technology to solve some issue, then I know that this is not someone that got really deep understanding of how business works, right? So yeah, I think that that's a great point, that technology is just a tool, right? And we should provide the most simple solution that actually meets the business goal, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, with Internet of Things, we should always be cognizant that collecting the data and creating automation autonomy is one thing, but you know, is there a match into the business's other systems with it? And you know, like we may be able to solve a problem on a production line of manufacturing, as an example, but their systems that they have on monitoring that may just not be able to take it and cope with it, and that you'd have a bit of a disjoint in those processes. And marrying IT and OT together, information technology with operational technology, can have its benefits, but can also deliver its challenges as well, and therefore further investment and consideration. So it's one of those things that, like, you know, I'm always quite keen on doing validation and discovery, not just at the specific problem, but then taking a step back and looking at the forest before we start to go into the trees and start to work things that way. John, any thoughts there?
So a lot of the concerns that a lot of my customers talk about is the maintainability of a solution. So, you know, you've developed something and you've walked away. How am I going to maintain this thing? It's a black box. Do we know, you know, who's going to make modifications to it? Who's going to make changes to it? If it goes wrong, who do we call? This is part of my belief why IoT doesn't have the market penetration that it should do. Is that a lot of these technologies and maintainability are not well understood within organizations.
I think that's a really good point, mate. Actually, that it resonates an awful lot. That you know, it's if you look at like some of the companies I've worked for in the past, and with business partners as well, like delivering edge platforms and stuff, right? That you can bring components of technology, be it hardware, software, but it's the integration piece and the management and support piece that actually is actually the real challenge. And I think that's potentially why a phrase that I should have trademarked, proof of concept graveyard. And what I mean by that is there are so many IoT proof of concepts that happen. And I mean, the terminology is even starting to evolve of proof of value and a couple of others that I've heard over the past couple of months as well. But it's solving the particular problem. But then when you start to look at, is this scalable, and then take the complexity of the support and integration and scaling out across a country or across the world, creates a whole load of other problems. And that's why a lot of businesses actually then start to look at working with system integrators, global system integrators, and having it part of their, hoping that they can get them to take it to then lead it themselves. But then, you know, will they make the investment? Well, only if there's a good enough return on them and a true scalable return for them to make that investment on it, right? Which does make it challenging for those smaller businesses that are creating wonderful solutions or components, modules of a solution.
Yeah, well, that's a good call. That well, if you can create a component like hardware or software, firmware, or whatever, right? You need to make sure that it will integrate nicely with all of those big technologies and tools on the market, right? Because if you invent the best protocol that is not compatible with anything on the market, then no one will use it, right? So
Yeah.
I think this is very, very good point. And you said about you mentioned the return of investment. To be honest, sometimes it is very hard to actually measure that because you've got so many moving parts. Like you've got the running costs, you've got various cost factors that actually are connected with the IoT solution as such, right? So there are cases when you can actually make the calculation of the costs and the benefits, but sometimes IoT is just an enabler that enables you to offer some additional services, right? Or to provide some extra value to the customers. And then it's pretty hard to measure if the value that IoT enables actually, justifies the costs or not. At least this is from my perspective, that it's not always that easy to judge.
But if you've got a solution that saves someone's time, this person is taking this reading, it takes 10 minutes a day, they're paid this amount over the year, we will save this number of minutes. You can quantify that saving. And then you can say, well, your return on investment having spent this is to save all of that time. Then the payback becomes easy.
You're right. So maybe I was not precise enough. So in the industrial Internet of Things deployments, this is typically something that you can measure. But when you've got the consumer IoT, right, then this added value that we offer for the end users, it's way harder to measure because you can try to do some upsell once you've got IoT enabled product. So based on the data that you gather, you can sell some additional services. Though in that case, it's not that easy to define if that upsell was actually successful because of the IoT part or because something else. So I agree with you that in industrial IoT, in the corporate IoT, you can measure that because you've got processes, you've got manual labor and all of that. But in the consumer market, I think it's still very tricky.
Yeah, are we moving into a world that actually more of the end-to-end solution offering and being able to integrate is becoming a demand to help the scale with IoT? And what I mean by that is, there's a number of edge platforms out there, IoT platforms out there. There's model training platforms for using computer vision. There are so many different components, as well as your hardware consideration, that if you think about that buyer journey and experience, is it actually having a black box solution what the market really needs to really help drive the scale of IoT that we've been promised as forecasts from the market that really haven't happened, right? There is adoption without a doubt there, and some things have worked a lot better than others. The connected car, as an example, is a good example with electric cars and such like, especially. But as I mentioned, I was at the manufacturing event, the Northeast Automotive event last week, and what really impressed me was there was a company, I think it's Forjaw. Do apologize if I've got that name wrong. I have asked them to come and join the show. They've got a great blocks, connects on, clips onto the wires, and all of a sudden you've got a whole load of information of what's going on your production line with it. Very simple to install, right? An IT junior engineer could do it. There was a great solution that really impressed me, which was a computer vision solution that was end to end. You could train a custom model with under 200 images. So, that would take minutes to do. And that actually deployed and run on the same compute box to give you that inference output, the data output. It had a dashboard. So there straight away, you had a system that you could then integrate into whatever extended system through its open API to create more of to start to build up that automation and autonomy, right? Whereas at the moment, the predominance of the market is still very modular. there are bits and components to plug together. John, thoughts?
So certainly the cloud providers seem to think that they have the answer to this. They, whether it's Belina or AWS or Azure, the amount of resources they're putting into being the integration hub, they answer the integration question. You don't integrate with the factory machinery. You don't get the different pieces to talk to each other. You just talk the swathe of protocols that they support, and you talk into their IoT hubs and do all the processing there to then send data out to the other IoT devices. So that solves that problem. That's their pitch, it seems to me.
But does it solve a sorry, Lucas? But it doesn't solve a problem for an offline system, though, does it? Because it does have that heavy dependency of the cloud.
Yeah, well, I mean, I live in Internet of Things. That solely suggests connected.
But it can be connected without being connected to the public internet, though.
Yeah. So okay. So there are actually a few things here that I want to comment on. And first of all, I would say that I've got pretty deep knowledge of Internet of Things using AWS Cloud, and unfortunately, it is not out of the box working solution by no means. Like, it provides the building blocks, but requires really significant amount of study and thinking on the design side of things, how to connect all of those blocks in a secure, scalable, and cost-effective way. So unfortunately, we are not there yet. It's not like turnkey solution by no means. Regarding the online and offline, then for sure, I totally agree with the opinion that IoT system as such should work in case of the network issue. So you don't want your production line to basically stop because you've got some network outage, right? And there are ways to orchestrate the equipment in the factory, for instance, or in a lab without access to the backend system, which is a cloud in this case, for a few hours, let's say, or even a few days if you need to. So we can do that, right? That's totally the case. And the third thing that I want to comment on is the public internet. So the I in the IoT, which is the Internet of Things, does not stand from the public internet, right? So we can have the IoT system or even IoT offering that does not use public internet at all. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
I appreciate the clarification. Just bringing up the presentation here. So, in regards to the role of as an IoT consultant, you're highlighting here, like thought leadership with customers. Is that what you're saying, Lewis?
Yeah. So this is what I believe is the mindset of the IoT consultant that helps when we work with the customers, because most of the time the customer is not the IT company, right? They own a bakery, let's say, and they are master in terms of making bread, and we should use the IoT technology to help them improve their business, basically, right? So that's why I think we should talk about the capabilities in relation to the business that they've got in up and running, right? It's not add technology just for sake of adding the most recent technology. And going a bit deeper into the business value, I would say the business value term is very, very broad, right? And the one way that I look at it to provide business value to my customers is I can help them optimize the running costs, right? Which is something that probably you don't really think about from the very beginning when you speak about the IoT engagement. But actually, this is something that is a really tangible outcome for the customers. The same goes with the security and privacy. And you mentioned that security is super crucial. The same is true for privacy, right? So if you can ensure that the IoT offering that you're building for someone is secure and respects the privacy, then that is the actual business value that we provide. And at the very bottom, I've got the design and development of the technical solution, which is going back to my developer's mindset. This is something that I would love to focus on just for pure fun of it, right? To building stuff. But this is not something that actually provides the value for the end users. So yeah, this is how I look at it. And I would really like to get your inputs on how do you see the business value that we as IoT consultants can offer for the customers.
Yeah, I'd add to that compliance. Sometimes there's a legislative framework you have to be compliant with, so you just have to do it. Environmental standards. So if you've got dealing with a situation where you're reducing effluent into discharge, or you have to notice when it's above a certain level, that can attract fines if you don't do it properly. So you can save the company money there.
Yeah, I think it goes around in regards to what you're saying here is goes back to the original statement, right? It's about the problem point, and then it's demonstrating to deliver the business value. But what's in regards to like an IoT consultant, I've always depended on my resource and people around me, be it in the business I'm working in or the network that I have. One of the reasons why I created IoT North a number of years ago, right, was to build up that network. So I had great people to collaborate with when I just unearthed those opportunities. So, in regards to the business value and the opportunity there is also like not just what they know, but the people who are right to pull in to these opportunities as well, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think that is the great segue to how to become an IoT consultant. And maybe you could share how you started actually, right? Because I think that would be very, very interesting to hear.
Wow. How I started as an IoT consultant by accident is probably the honest answer. I worked for Telstra in Australia. I was working with the Department of Defence, and this is back in 2007. And their problem statement was the armed forces, when they were in the outback at training camps, would forget to turn the electricity off when they left, which would rack up huge bills. And they were looking to create efficiency to remotely manage that, so that when they knew there was no training camps going on at a certain station, that rather than having to send somebody for several hours to drive back and turn the lights off in the aircon, that they could remotely do it. And it was literally an Ericsson gateway, a compute unit, and a car battery. That solved the problem, or at least as a proof of concept. And so from that was really how I built it. And my experience was prior to that was advising on mobile comms solutions. So, applications on mobile devices, which were just starting to really evolve with the delightful Microsoft Windows operating system. And if anybody remembers that, they'll remember how horrendous it was. Literally putting the same sized applications from your PC onto your phone at the time didn't really work and killed your battery. I don't miss the days of walking around with a spare battery in my pocket, I've got to admit, but I do miss the ease of being able to just swap a battery. That was something great. But advising on how to digitize from paper to web forms and stuff like that was kind of where it all started to grow from, and then stumbling across opportunities where, leveraging what was known as telemetry at that point, and being connectivity and the data to and from, banks, cash point machines and stuff, and machine to machine sims with that. And then it evolved from that, to be quite honest. Again, working in telecom, enabling IoT solutions, so smart meters, and having this great infrastructure in place of being able to pull that data. And actually, if they had poor, weak coverage, they relied on SMS to send the data. And it was like, hold on, you could just send it by a text message on a frequent basis rather than having a continuous connection. But being part of those solutions and architects, and then just building out from there, and then starting to fall into more of the market where I still think one of the biggest markets and definitely the growing markets still is in industrial space, right? The efficiencies that can come from it. And it blows my mind um, hearing that there are literally thousands of jobs in the northeast region of the country. It's the same across the country, to be fair. And I believe it's also a problem across Europe as well. People don't want to work in factories anymore. They don't want to work in industrial jobs. So that there is that drive and demand because they're unable to fill those jobs, that the requirement for autonomy and automation and evolve into autonomy is key to keep the lights on in some situations.
Yeah, that is for sure the case. That there are some kind of jobs that are just not meant for human beings, right? Like those very simple repetitive tasks, right? There is no gain from doing that by hand, right? And if we could delegate those specific tasks for machines and let people use their imagination more, I think that would be very, very helpful. And the industrial IoT is a great example of that. That's
Yeah.
totally.
I've seen some great examples by companies like Bravant in Spain who've created Poka-yoke manufacturing processes, which is basically guiding people so you don't have to invest in months of training somebody on how to create a gearbox. That actually there's a computer vision guided system that literally it's like watching a interactive Lego guide in building something. So then that component can go off down the line by having humans involved in it. But what it does is it makes sure that they're wearing PPE, so reduces risks for the manufacturer for health and safety, but also creates accountability, traceability, and such like as well. So it's that progression through into the big investments in robotics.
Yeah, like we need to start somewhere, right? And starting in a way that those not even robots, right? But those IoT systems are basically supporting human labor. I think that's a great way to start and actually to learn, right? To understand the process, to understand all the pitfalls. And once we've got that knowledge and we gathered some data, then we can actually start to automate and to leverage the autonomy of certain steps, right? So
Yeah,
totally,
exactly. And
that's right.
the great opportunity of like gamifying things, make work fun,
Yeah,
why not? And by leveraging the capabilities of IoT and stuff, you can do it. I mean, we used to do a demo at a previous company I used to work at. We used to do a demo at events, which was a smart pallet solution using computer vision. And it was beat the clock. And you had flashing lights on, so you knew if the box was on the right pallet or the wrong pallet. But like, you could actually like really drive that into gamification, leaderboards, so on and so forth, to kind of, just make the working day slightly interesting and a bit competitive and such like, to drive a positive impact with it.
yeah, totally. And I think that the traceability is a huge part, right, in the whole industrial space. If you can trace all of the components or the ingredients, right, of the complex piece of machinery, like a car, for instance, right, then in case of any issues detected with a single piece of the whole car, you can really trace it to all vehicles that are impacted, which is a huge gain, right? So you can and you can bring that further to like the predictive maintenance and stuff, because once you can decompose the car into multiple parts, then it's way easier to simulate and predict the states of single part than of a huge car, right? So
Yeah.
we are kind of going to the digital twin space. But digital twin is just a concept, right? And we need to fit it with tons of clear labeled data. So starting from gathering that data and from validating the data by human beings, I think that's the right way
The,
to go.
yeah, there's actually a great solution, and this show is mine, and it has got nothing to do with my employers, Intel's views or anything like that. But there is a system called Scenescape by Intel, which helps you create your digital twin very quickly and easily, and using computer vision and stitching the different camera locations together to create that digital environment, digital twin, and creating a map of foot flow and so on and so forth, that it is seriously impressive on how quickly that can have positive impacts. Now, what you do with that, well, it's about being data driven, isn't it? And then from that, you can then start to look at how you can create efficiencies with humans, but then also consider how you will create efficiencies in your processes and stuff, and start to adopt further technology. I'm going to mention robots again because I've seen loads of really cool ones recently, and start to drive them in helping things move forward. Not just focusing on industrial, but it has its use cases there and value there as well, right?
Yeah, and what you said is actually extremely important, that that specific solution is not something that you need to integrate into your whole process, right? Or your whole stack. It basically works out of the box, and it got the integration built in, because it can gather data, pre-process the data, and present it to you. So I think that's a huge gain for the end users. And what you said about those proof of concept graveyards, most of them failed because of they were not providing the value by them own, right? For various of reasons. And if you can offer a solution that provides value on its own, plus it can integrate with other solutions, other systems on the shop floor, for instance, then you can see an adoption. Because in that case, it actually makes a business sense to invest in your product, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it goes back to the statement I made earlier of like, are we starting to head with IoT to a point where pardon the term, but a black box, an end-to-end solution that can be plugged in, so it can be standalone solution that solves a problem but can extend out to wider integration? Is that the way that the market needs to be pushing forward more of, rather than here's the software, but you need to go and choose the hardware, and then you need to integrate it, and it creates that huge level of complexity, and creates, maybe for a customer, fear factor. Who is responsible if this part doesn't work? Who is responsible for that? And quite often it's like, well, it's not my fault, it's the hardware fault, and the hardware's like, it's not my fault, it's the software fault.
Exactly. And the baker, right, it does not have to got all of those IT and hardware skills to basically make that whole system up and running, right? And they don't really care about what is inside that black box, as long as it delivers the promise. So as you said, like if we decouple the firmware from software, from hardware, from network, from security, then it's a mess. And that's why IoT consultants got job, kind of, right? Because we can solve that mess, solve that puzzle, and deliver the working solution for the end customer. But if that is really good from the end user perspective, that they need to hire someone to clean up that mess for them, probably not, right? Probably they just would be better off buying working solution off the shelf. Yeah, I agree with that totally.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I found. Like, just not to go on a bit of a tangent, but John knows me, I go on tangents. But one of the things that really got me quite excited when I've started to be seeing a lot more metaverse use cases, and I was always a little bit dubious about it after spending 20 minutes with a headset on, right? But it's really starting to evolve. The headsets are getting smaller. And then I start to see some use cases of actually, getting customers to see the value of investment in IoT, and actually getting them to see the digital twin coming through, leveraging metaverse. There was a project I worked on a few years ago now, and it always resonated with me that there was actually really good value, but the cost of it was just too high at the time. And this is where that whole thing about proof of concept graveyard is it demonstrable that the technology works, but actually cost, time to make, integration, all those haven't caught up quite yet for it to be scalable, so it goes off to the graveyard and can hopefully be resuscitated. That this is like kind of one of those things where it was a headset for a manufacturer of airplanes. And what they were looking to do was create that traceability, accountability, and education age and workforce, where wearing a headset they could look at an engine and go, that's faulty, and then they'd look over towards the warehouse and it would show the bouncing part that would needed. It would tag that they had taken it. It would then show them the instructions in regards to the process of being able to do it. That actually, when you start to think of that combination of mixed reality and that experience of leveraging IoT with that, you can really start to see. I mean, it is a little bit Minority Report, the value of it on so many different levels, and it would make work a bit interesting for people, right? In that type of space. I did see the recent live stream of a Meta interview with Zuckerberg, and it was absolutely terrifying on how realistic they've got it now with the scan of your face and stuff, that when you talk and the emotions and everything come out, it literally looked like the real him, right? And in fact, it's not me tonight. It's actually using that technology. It's not really. But
no, it's a good example though, where you've got a technology like a physical piece of hardware that may become obsolete within 1 or 2 years. Does anyone remember Google Glass came out?
Yeah.
£1,000. Great idea. People bought them, loved it, and it was tanked within 12 months.
Yeah.
So you've really got to believe that the hardware solution has some kind of longevity before you start investing in that. And that's why that market's going to require a critical mass before it starts getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Because we are still in the very early phase of prototyping, right? And prototypes are expensive by definition, right? And most of them cannot scale for various of reasons, because we are basically building those black boxes, but still figuring out what to put inside and how to organize it. So I agree with both of you that those things are way too expensive currently, most of them, and there is no trust from the market perspective that those things will stay around for, let's say, like 20 years, right? Because if we are speaking about industrial Internet of Things, industrial as a general market, like they do not swap the whole production line every 2 years, right? They modify it like once, 10 year or whatever, right? So that's why the IoT market needs to become way more mature, both from the hardware perspective, from the capabilities perspective, and from the support from the vendors as well, that we will see the true adoption of those solutions. And metaverse is a great example, because like I always, whenever I talk about a metaverse with someone, I always bring up the IoT, because the IoT basically feeds data from the real world, right? IoT is that foundation that bridges the gap between the physical world and the digital world. So the metaverse will build on top of IoT solutions. That's why it's extremely important for us to design those proper foundations, because once we've got that solved and that working as expected, then we can create those high-level use cases and offerings, and metaverse is just one of them.
Yeah. I was on mute. I thought I was going to get a show where I didn't do that. But damn it. But one of the things that I've started to really jump on with the metaverse side of things is the digital twin, and leveraging cameras and creating digital twins, using it to then start to move things around. And I've seen some great examples out there. It's still at that quite high price point for adoption, but you can then start to prospectively start to take those black boxes I'm talking about as solutions, that you could try them out in that digital twin environment, see how it works before you then actually start to do the physical.
Yeah, I mean, all these visualizations, they're very crime scene investigation, aren't they? They look very, very swish and swanky. And you think, how much time and money has someone taken to create that? Unless they're doing all of the legwork for you, that's probably quite a large piece of development. Now, if someone else out there wants to correct me and tell me I'm wrong, I'm quite prepared to eat my words.
I'm trying to remember what the name of the platform was, but it is becoming much easier and much lower cost, and there's so much open source out there now that actually putting the components together, you can actually get something really slick looking at a fairly reasonable
AWS
cost.
and Azure both got offerings in that regard. So you can sort of do line traces of rooms, and then you can create the twin within the room, and then get live telemetry like temperature sensor, air sensor, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So, how to become an IoT consultant? Getting us back on track.
Yeah,
long time ago, I did a bit of embedded development. I was in a consultancy. My first job was consultant, and they said so I was doing 20% sales marketing, 80% coding, and then someone said, "Hey, John, you can code. Can you code this PDA thing I've got here?" So I did some coding on that, and then kind of built from there. And I've done various jobs over the years that seem to have got for bigger and bigger and for bigger clients. And then you gain a bit of reputation on LinkedIn, and then people start asking you whether you're available, and it kind of builds from there.
And what about you, Lewis? How did you get into it?
Yeah, like myself, as I said at the very beginning, like I was always messing with devices and trying to put some logic on them. But to be honest, for most of my life, I was not really thinking about it as a skill that someone can pay me for. That was something that I was doing always in my like free time, basically as a hobby. And once the cloud backend got more mature, I realized that the impact that someone like me can have is way bigger than a single device that I can play with, basically, right? And that started me to realize the huge potential and how to basically leverage those skills to make an impact. So yeah, like I started purely from fun and purely from the developer's mindset, and that's why I had to put some effort to work backwards to more the business perspective. Yeah, and now the other question is based on your experience that you got right now, what is the best way to start your IoT journey as an IoT consultant? Like, do you have any tips that you could share with the audience?
Learn relentlessly, I would say, and find a small job, an opportunity, and then get the most you can out of that. So someone in the chat is wanting to implement a solution to manage a palm grove in Morocco. You could take that and you could develop a solution, and then you can publicize it all over the place, that the solution you've created, and then people might notice you. You might see it on your CV, and you'll get more work that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think one is looking at your experience and where you fit, and then building out your network, being part of IoT North and being an active member, as well as other communities out there. There's some great IoT communities in regards to meetups, as well as others through Azure and AWS and the like as well. And just having a keen interest in figuring things out, right? It's about problem solving at the end of the day. As John's mentioned about this one here, in regards to this to me is jumping out as something that wouldn't be too complex to do with a fairly low cost solution. And in fact,
you can do it with an Arduino.
Yeah. So the requirements are here. It's first meetup call. Thanks so much for joining us. Understand IoT. I'm looking for best practices. Project has to be low cost, scalable, under 500 trees, manageably. Is that minus or plus?
Greater than.
Thank you.
Over.
Yeah. Over 500 trees, manageable remotely, and hopefully can be reused across palm groves in regions where water is very limited.
Proof of concept, extensive testing, integration with a solid cloud platform, using off-the-shelf libraries, test it over a number of different seasons, so it'll last cold winters, hot summers. And the sensor's got to be appropriate for your region.
Yeah.
So probably the moisture sensor for the UK is not going to work for Morocco.
Yeah. So then it's having that local connections to be able to make some recommendations for you on what sensors would be best suited there, right?
Yeah, and what I would add is very technical, though that is something that when overlooked at the very beginning can make you fail once you succeed and scale. Is once you've got the very early stage of prototype working, try to automate those little tasks as much as possible, right? Because through the automation you will enable scale, and this is something that you want, right? In this example, and automation also enables traceability. So because yeah, the mistakes that I used to do myself long time ago is that I was trying to make some piece of hardware work, and finally I succeeded, but I was no clue what actually make that thing worked, right? Because I was changing everything by hand, like purely by random. So if you can codify your setup as much as possible and automate it, then whatever you're changing, you've got basically track of your changes using like Git, for instance. And it is way easier to maintain, to debug your solutions, and to reach the scale. And with scale and with automation, you can reduce cost as well. So this is what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think for this one as well, with the scale side of things and the type of data you're going to be collecting for those types of sensors, is it's going to be fairly low data. So then thinking about what you're going to use to connect, you could be leveraging your own private LoRaWAN, or if there's public ones out there that you could be tapping into it, which is then going to be power consumption, another consideration for you. Or you're going to be able to power by a solar, which I'd imagine in Morocco you're going to be fortunate to be able to do, rather than John and I in the north of England, and even Lucas in Poland, right? Solar is our friend in the summer and not in the winter for us. But in Morocco, I think you'd be able to have a good sustainable use for that. So those are considerations in regards to power management, connectivity, how you leverage good battery for that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a great project to start, because it basically enables you to learn all of those verticals. Like you will learn about the hardware, the firmware, connectivity, software, some kind of backend, right? While solving the actual business case. And
as a consultant, you'll be thinking about the value. What value does this project deliver? Does it save the trees from dying? Which means that we get more yield over the time. What is the investment in this product going to do in terms of saving the farmer money?
Yeah, I was going to. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but I was going to have a look and see, because I'm pretty sure I saw on Bellina there is in their resources. I'm pretty sure there are examples that would be able to be a good blueprint to use for that type of solution, using those types of sensors, because they're quite commonly used combined sensors, right? So
and just think of the digital twin. You could have a nice oasis with palm trees sticking out of it with that moisture signs. I think that'd be that'd be great.
That could actually it's something that could sell your product, right? Like if you've got pretty dashboard, it sells very good, as long as you've got all the basics in place, right? So you've got the security in place, scalability, cost, and whatnot, right? But if you can add some fancy dashboard on top of that, then you are really into the right place to succeed with your solution.
I think that's a really valid point, actually. That like for the non-technical, what they want to see is the data visualized, so it's easy to understand.
No one cares about sensors, right? No one cares about technology. They just want to see that real time.
You could also surface the same information with a report or just a text message that says tree 42 needs watering now, please.
Simple,
you don't need a fancy visualization, but it does look very nice.
I mean, there's so many great dashboards out there that you can compile that are quite simple to use, and I agree with you. Does it need to be fancy, or does it just need to be quite clear and simple to understand, right? Look at it, this is what's going on, this is what I need to do. I don't even need to think about what I do, and I'm going to go out there and say, if you really want to get fancy, then you start chucking in, ChatGPT, LLM, log language models.
I mean, as a demo project, it looks great. It'll look great on your CV. I'm not sure the farmer needs it though.
Well,
let's try not to blow the features that you want to put inside, because that would create a complexity that is extremely hard to manage, right? So.
And here's the lesson of working with IoT consultants. Sometimes they can get over enthused and start to throw every toy into the basket.
Totally.
Rather than just keeping it basic. So, keep it simple and then build on it, right?
Yeah. Keep it simple. That's
major value. Prevent waste of water, overwatering. Thank you for ideas that I didn't think about. The pause was obvious. Solar and visualization when the solution will be shared with other farms. Hey, this is great, right? Keep us updated on it. Would love to hear about. If you get it off the ground, come and talk to everybody about it and show how you got started and what value you saw, and even if it didn't work out, the challenges that you had. On why it didn't work out. We learn more from failures than we do from successes, as many famous CEOs say, which I do believe in, because I've made plenty of mistakes in the past. Anyway, we are. Was that the last slide that you had, Lucas?
Yeah. So one comment before we proceed. I think that you should avoid making any assumptions about skill set of your end users, right? So do not expect they've got any types of knowledge of the hardware, software, whatever, right? You try to make this solution as turnkey close as possible, right? This is what Paul said, that you've got a black box, and that box is doing everything that needs to be done to provide the solution. So yeah, try to do that and try to reduce the friction required to make the setup running. Because when someone is just going to plug your device and can see data showing up in the mobile phone, then that's a huge win, right? If they need to make some configuration locally, they can basically do some mistakes and will never use your solution anymore. So yeah, this is what I would suggest, that do not expect your users to have any IT skills.
Excellent.
And that brings us to my last slide, which is what is the most important technical or non-technical skill for IoT consultant? Paul, what or John?
I'm going to John first.
Yeah.
Okay. Communication and teamwork, being able to communicate with people. I'm never going to go out of a job, because my main job is understanding what people really want the system to do, not what they're asking for.
Great answer. And you stole mine, because that's what I was going to say. But I would say in my team who work my teams over the years, I have a saying which is 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen more than you speak. Be keen to it. Like, use active learning. I have to practice it quite a lot, because sometimes I forget. But try and listen as much as possible. On top of what John suggested, I think communication is key for sure, and teamwork and collaboration. What about you, Lucas?
And now you have stolen my answer.
Yay! I got it first.
And that was not set up by no means, but yeah, for me, the basically shut up and listen. This is something I need to constantly remind myself, because I want to engage so much and I want to share all of my ideas that I can overwhelm the whole meeting and the customer and drive the whole meeting in totally different way, not providing any actual value. So for me to basically sit down, listen, ask questions regarding what value the customer actually expects, this is the most important skill. And do not be too much focused on the technology, right? And do not put your own beliefs and taste into the picture. Because developers, as IoT consultants, as everyone else, we've got all our own personal taste. Like, we prefer this language or the other, this framework or the other database, or what else, right? And customer doesn't care, and we should focus on what provides the value for the end users. And to do that, my personal advice to myself is just to sit quiet and listen.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Hey, thanks so much for your time and bringing this great discussion point to us. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Look forward to next time as well. John, what have we got next show?
Next month, we have a low-code, no-code solution for IoT to make IoT more accessible, and a talk on AI adoption for IoT. Two very buzzwordy talks. I'm just waiting for the second speaker to finalize their abstract, and then I'll publicize it. So hopefully that'll be in the next couple of days, and I'll get it out across all of our meetups.
Excellent. Apologies, we have had a problem with LinkedIn tonight, and we haven't been streaming to it, but I did share the link to YouTube to catch us live. If you haven't been able to catch it, hopefully you've caught it afterwards. Thanks very much again, everybody, for joining us. Great engagement and conversation. Very much enjoyed it. And on that, good night.